Welcome to the 600th edition of the Enfield talking newspaper, Dateline, 18th of September 1986. Your readers in this edition are
Paul,
Janet,
Harvey,
Betty. In this edition we have Harvey with some nostalgic memories, some notes on what's on, and of course all the news we can get onto the tape. And may we remind you that from October the 2nd we'll be going weekly. Now, over to Harvey.
Yes, this week we celebrate the 600th edition of the Enfield Talking newspaper. We were one of the first such organisations to appear in this country, a quarter of a century ago. The Enfield Gazette of Friday, May the 19th, 1961, records the following on its front page. About 15 elderly and blind people sat in a room at the British Legion Club, Cecil Road, last Friday, and heard the news, not from the voice of a BBC announcer, but from a local voice, giving a summary of the local news from the Gazette and Observer. The idea of making a tape recording came from members of Enfield Talk H. They invited the blind folk along to their meeting room. After the first news tape, there were cries of wonderful and marvellous. The article goes on to note that out of the 100 blind people thought to be living in the area, only 10 had come forward requesting such a service. The week-by-week selection would probably be recorded on the Gazette's publication day, the master recording circulated to the blind folk, each keeping it for about 24 hours. Only one machine was being used, but it was hoped that more would be obtained. Last week's broadcast had been done by a certain Mr. and Mrs. Dick Turpin of Ladysmith Road, and one item had concerned his historical namesake, the highwayman. Others present included Councillor L.C. Merrion, chairman of Enfield Old People's Welfare Association, himself blind, Mr. L.E. Francis, the branch secretary, and John Dredge. In the Gazette on that date, the main story was about a lorry that had lost control on the Great Cambridge Road and had gone into a bus shelter while turning into Carterhatch Lane. One woman had been killed. In the recent local council elections, the Labour Party had lost several important seats to the Conservatives. Other news included the jailing of a father and son for their part in a robbery at a grocer's store, and in sport, a few days after Spurs had clinched the League and Cup double with victory over Leicester City at Wembley, Enfield won the London Senior Cup against Wealdstone at Highbury. The Sandwest Dramatic Society performed Over the Garden Fence, admirably putting over the mood of Elizabeth Addyman's domestic tragicomedy, as the paper's theatre critic put it. And you could buy a Ford convertible for £936 and a gas fridge for under £30. If we turn to the local paper of a few months later to find out what was going on exactly 25 years ago this week, we learn about a fine of £100 imposed on a cafe for failing to comply with health regulations. An inspector had reported that the town eatery was crawling with worms. Elsewhere, a car had been damaged by a homemade bomb, and there was the usual spate of accidents and burglaries. We hear that Enfield's Bigger and Better two-day show will open in Town Park with 14 marquees, displays of works of art, and stands run by voluntary societies. Meanwhile, representatives of Enfield Garage bus crews called for a conference to support busmen in a request for a public inquiry into the workings of London transport. There were plenty of jobs for school leavers. The rate of unemployment in the area was 0.9%, compared with a national average of 1.4%. The advertisements included Vauxhall's proud announcement of their new victor, while in football there was excited anticipation of Spurs' European Cup match against the Russian side Gornik. There had even been talk in the media that the game would be staged at Wembley to accommodate all those who wanted to see it. Well, decide for yourselves how much things have changed over this period. Perhaps you have your own recollections of life in Enfield in 1961. We would be more than happy to receive your anecdotes and memories, and we promise to broadcast them on the air. But we must now move forward to 1986, and here's Betty with today's first item of news.
The death has occurred in Canada of two Enfield people, Stan Taylor and his wife Norma, both 64 years of age. They were killed along with their two young grandchildren whom they were taking for an outing when a train hit their car at a level crossing. The accident happened at their adopted hometown of Alamonte, Ontario, at the end of last month. They are survived by their daughter Jill and Mr. Taylor's sister Gwen Lorimer, who lives in Enfield with her husband.
A lifetime of service to the community was remembered at St Aldheim's Church, Edmonton, during a service of thanksgiving for Mildred Mary Bryant, who who recently died aged 77. A member of the well-known Cowley family of Enfield and sister of Winifred Cowley of Lavender Hill, Mildred was known to countless girls, their mothers and even grandmothers who had been brownies, guides or rangers under her. She had been skipper of SRR ISIS in district and division commissioner for Enfield Guides. The guiding accolade of the Oakleaf was presented to Mildred in 1961. A founding member of Bishop Stopford, she took a special interest and pride in the success of the school. After retiring from the National Westminster Bank, where she had been the very first woman chief cashier, Mrs. Bright took up posts as secretary at Hazelberry School and then Aylward School. For over 50 years she gave unlimited service to St Aldheim's Church, where she regularly worshipped. She was a member of the deanery and the diocesan synods.
Friends and relatives of a hard-working supporter of the Scouting movement have been mourning her death. Grandmother Linda Baird, aged 75, of Friars Walk, Southgate, died following a car accident in Wales. She and her husband Bill were heading for their holiday destination at the time of the crash. Mrs. Baird had strong links with Scouting in the Cockfosters area, working with the 11th Southgate group for more than 30 years. When her sons Matthew and Jonathan joined the Cubs in the second Cockfosters group, Mrs. Baird set out to make successes of group events such as markets and jumble sales, and was always there to offer comfort to those who needed it. During her long association with the 11th Southgate group, her daughter Anne became an Arcala and an assistant district commissioner, and her sons gained Queen Scout awards. Mrs. Baird collected contributions for Help the Aged and Dr. Barnardo's, and amassed huge collections of stamps for Scout funds.
At least 10,000 votes were lost in May's borough elections because residents did not bother to register their vote. Now, council officers have issued a warning to voters to get their names on the electoral register or miss out on their democratic right. Electoral Registration Officer Keith Ridgewell said that of the 203,000 Enfield people entitled to record a vote in borough, national and European elections, more than 10,000 did not bother to get their names on the register. Each year, thousands of potential voters find their path to the ballot box blocked because they have not bothered to fill out the necessary forms. Each household in the borough of Enfield receives a form explaining the need to get on the register, but these forms are often ignored or forgotten. And at election time, disappointed people are turned away from the polls and denied a vote. We publicise the register well enough, and the majority of people who don't apply to be on it do so because they're not bothered. But when the parliamentary elections come round and they can't vote, it always seems to be our fault. That is the only election they are bothered about. Residents are required by law to fill in the electoral forms annually posted through their doors and can be prosecuted for failing to do so. When people do find out they cannot vote, they often lay the blame with the registration officers based in Gentleman's Row in Enfield. We are the ones they take it out on if they're not on the register, said Mr. Ridgewell. They say it is our fault, and they never saw a form, or that they definitely sent it back to us. Mr. Ridgewell does not believe that part of the problem lies with ethnic minority groups, who may not fully understand the forms. The onus must be on the voter as well as on the staff of the local authority. We don't want to leave anybody out. The electoral register is compiled each October, and everybody aged 18 and over is eligible to vote. People whose 18th birthday falls in the following year should also be registered. The current electoral register is available for viewing at borough libraries.
Fundraisers amassed more than £950 for a charity animal clinic from a successful garden fete last week. Enfield and Lee Valley RSPCA joined forces with the staff of Clay Hill House, Clay Hill, Enfield, to attract a stream of visitors and raise much-needed funds for the RSPCA clinic in Primrose Avenue, Enfield. The house grounds include a small bird sanctuary. House matron Anne Clegg and her staff worked hard to ensure the success of the event.
A regular visitor to Southgate swimming pool has boycotted the place after pool managers complained that he was too dirty to use it. Landscape gardener David Hayes of the High Street, Cheshunt, had almost finished his afternoon swim when he was asked to go to the manager's office. The manager of the pool in Winchmore Hill Road said 2 women had complained about Mr. Hayes' grubby feet, and he asked him to take a shower before visiting the pool again. Mr. Hayes returned for his swim a week later, but he did not reach the water. Before he had a chance to put his big toe in the pool, an attendant stopped in and asked him to take a shower. A disgusted Mr. Hayes maintained that he took a shower in the changing rooms on both occasions and had no need to take another. He said it was horribly unpleasant. On the first occasion, the manager was very civil. He more or less told me that he thought the women who complained were being elitist, and he hoped I would continue to use the pool. I came back a week later, and I was standing by the edge of the pool when another assistant manager made a beeline for me. He asked me if I was a landscape gardener. I said I was, and he said, "Would you mind taking a shower?" I told him I had already had one. He said, "Well, would you take another one?" Enfield's recreation manager, Ian Murray, said, "In the opinion of the staff, Mr. Hayes required a shower on both occasions." He said Mr. Hayes was welcome at the pool at any time.
A lot has changed since Jack Fairley became the landlord of the Old Sergeant pub in 1936. Then a pint of beer cost just 4p. The pub was much smaller and Parsonage Lane was little more than a country road. But one thing that hasn't changed over the years is Jack, and last week he celebrated his 50th anniversary at the pub. Surrounded by bottles of champagne and greetings cards, the 74-year-old and his wife Doreen lived it up with some of their regulars. The parting pub goers saw the couple presented with a crystal table lamp by Sam Whitbread, chairman of the brewery, who praised them for their dedicated work. The Mayor of Enfield, Councillor Wyn Reardon, dropped in to congratulate them, and the happy celebrations were recorded for television and radio. It wasn't a surprise when Jack became a landlord. He was born in a pub in Cheshunt and moved to the Hot Poles pub in Baker Street, Enfield, with his family when he was 9. He took over the Old Sergeant when he was 24 and has only left it since to serve in North Africa and Italy during the Second World War. Jack's aim has always been to preserve the pub's traditional family atmosphere here, and he has furiously resisted the brewery's aims to modernise it. As a result, he has built up a large band of regulars who enjoy the pub's old-time image, and Jack hasn't had any thoughts of moving on. Even now, after celebrating his 50th anniversary, he has no wish to retire. "I've had a very happy time. I've got a smashing lot of regulars and I've loved it here," he said. Among the charities he works for are the Licensed Victuallers National Homes and Licensed Victuallers Lighted Fuel Association. He's a selfless man. He spent his life working for charities and gives his time freely for any good causes, said Arthur Johnson, Secretary of the Northern Suburban Licensed Victuallers Association. Also keen to praise him were his regulars, including Fred Webb, who has frequented the pub since Jack took over. "There's not a better publican in Enfield. He's a generous man concerned very much with the welfare of the local community. You can sum it up in 4 words. He's a great guy."
An Enfield charity came to the rescue for 22-year-old Roy Johnson when they bought him a brand new electric wheelchair which enabled him to go on holiday. The charity, who call themselves A Little Bit of Everything, have been raising money for worthy local causes for the past 10 years. Roy, 22, suffers from muscular dystrophy, the gradual wasting of muscles in the body, and without the use of an electric wheelchair would be totally helpless. His mother, Mrs. Sylvia Johnson, who lives at World's End Lane, Enfield, said, "We badly needed to repair Roy's chair, but we were told the cost and realised it would be much wiser to buy a new chair. The charity got to hear that Roy needed a new chair and very kindly offered to buy one. They raised the £1,500 necessary, and we got the wheelchair on the very day that Roy was due to go to a hospital holiday care centre in Portsmouth. The charity raised the money through various events, including a sale and several stalls at local shows."
Licensee Spencer Lever of the Salisbury Arms, Hoppers Road, Winchmore Hill, is the London and Northern Home Counties Innkeeper of the Year. It is Mr. Lever's second successive win in the competition, and he will now take part in the national final, in which he finished a close second last year. His prizes for winning the regional award include an eye-catching exterior wall plaque. The national final in November takes the form of the popular television quiz Mastermind, with the first round of questions on local trade, the second on the licensed trade in general. The winner will receive a gold-plated plaque and £250 in travel vouchers.
Union legal experts are preparing themselves for another struggle to prove the innocence of a sacked matron of an old people's home. An appeal hearing into the case of Catherine Mullen, dismissed from the Elizabeth House home in Old Road, Enfield, is set to begin later this month, and her union, the General Municipal Boilermaker and Allied Trade Union, has again pledged to get her reinstated as soon as possible. Union Regional Organiser Paul Kenny defended Mrs Mullen throughout a Marathon Council inquiry at the start of the year. He has now handed over responsibility for her defence to solicitors. He said allegations of cruelty to residents had now been dropped, and Mrs Mullen was fighting on two main fronts: that she treated staff badly, and that her superiors found her difficult to work with. It is basically a conflict of styles over resident care, said Mr Kenny. The old approach to care of Mrs Mullen differs from the new concept of home life for the elderly promoted by the council. He believes the inquiry and investigations of the past year have cost ratepayers of Enfield anything up to £10,000. The hearing he took part in stretched from January to June, taking up more than 40 days of council and union time. He still firmly insists that there has been a gross miscarriage of justice in the dismissal of Mrs Mullen of Green Dragon Lane, Winchmore Hill. He hopes that a new set of councillors on the appeal panel will come to the case with a fresh eye. If Mrs Mullen's dismissal is upheld, the case will go to an industrial tribunal.
Enfield's four-legged inhabitants could soon have their own council representation. A working party on animal abuse has been recommended to be set up in the borough by Councillors' Coordination and Policy Committee. It follows an approach from Haringey Council to all London boroughs to meet and discuss initiatives taken by them on animal rights. Recommending a working party, Councillor Richard Corse said, "We need to offer some respect to animals." He cited the case of Jambo, the gorilla who comforted an injured 5-year-old boy who had fallen into his cage, and compared it to the number of murders of humans by humans reported that same day. The question of cruelty to animals is perhaps not the most important issue, but it has the interests of 70 to 80% of the Borough Council, of course, continued. The committee's recommendation was to be considered by Tuesday's full council meeting.
A shocked 74-year-old woman was taken to hospital when a double-decker bus ploughed into her sitting room last Monday morning. 5 other people, including the driver and conductor, were also taken to hospital. The bus hit a Vauxhall van and a Ford Granada before crashing into the semi-detached house in Byron Terrace, Hertford Road, Edmonton at 10 a.m. Edith Wright was doing her washing at the back of the house when a number 149 bus swerved off the road, through her front garden and smashed into her sitting room and front bedroom. The owner of the house, Mrs Wright's son, Kevin, was called home from work to find his home almost demolished. Visibly shaken, he said, "Look at my house, it's a complete mess. I can't go back and live in there." Mr Wright is a fitter at the Royal Ordnance Factory in Enfield Lock. Mrs Wright said, "I was doing my washing. I just turned the spin dryer off when I heard this almighty explosion. It was dreadful. I went into the dining room and all I could see was dust. When it cleared, there was a bus in the window." The driver of the bus, William Kingsland of Greenland Avenue in Enfield, is thought to have been taken ill at the wheel. He and his conductor, Frank Riddle of Harrow Drive, Lower Edmonton, were detained in the North Middlesex Hospital with head injuries and cuts to their arms and legs. 2 others, bus passengers Claire Houghton from Liverpool and passerby Linda Tyrrell from Dartford Avenue, Lower Edmonton, were treated for shock. The driver of the van the bus hit, Bernard Pallant of Stevenage, was also treated for shock.
Plans to build a 3-storey home for the elderly have been thrown out by Enfield councillors. Factors against the hostel, intended to be built in Lincoln Way, Enfield, included corridors too long, staircases badly sited, and poor outlook from rooms. Each of these aspects would make the home unsuitable for elderly residents, the planning officer's report stated. Not enough car parking spaces, too narrow an access road, and no separate footpath were other reasons for the hostel's rejection.
Most right-minded people would never dream of jumping out of an aeroplane 7,500 feet off the ground, but 80-year-old Sylvia Brett thoroughly enjoyed her first parachute descent. "It was really thrilling, and I'm hoping to have another go soon," said the fearless Mrs Brett from her home in Burncroft Avenue, Enfield. "Actually, it was even more dramatic than I'd expected, because the first time we went up, one of the engines conked out, and the plane had to make an emergency landing," she added. but Mrs. Brett was quite unperturbed by this minor technical difficulty. They sent an ambulance onto the airfield, and I think they imagined I'd be in a terrible state of shock, but I just wanted to get on with the jumping, she said. Another plane went up, and Mrs. Brett finally made her daring leap on August Bank Holiday in Bedfordshire to go down in the Guinness Book of Records as the world's oldest woman parachutist. Describing her descent, she said, "When you jump off the platform, you fall for about 6 seconds, and then the parachute opens. Below I saw all these coloured pimples, and then they opened out into cornfields, grass and farmland." She added, "You get a wonderful feeling of peace up there, and it's done my arthritis a power of good." Mrs. Brett made the jump with her niece and her niece's son, so 3 Brett generations plunged through the sky on the same day. "I can't wait for the next time. I'm going to try for a longer descent," she confessed.
A callous caretaker failed to put the dampers on a successful sponsored swim by Gazette and press staff last week. He rudely ordered an Enfield blind man and his guide dog to leave the poolside. That one sour note was drowned out by the enthusiasm of staff and generous sponsors who achieved their ambitious aim by raising more than £1,000 to buy a guide dog for the blind. The caretaker now faces a severe reprimand.
The gratitude of one patient has seen Chase Farm Hospital receive 5 cool air fans. Gabe Marks, Vice President of the Southgate and Palmer's Green Association of Jewish Ex-Servicemen and Women, presented staff at the hospital's intensive care unit with the fans. It was Mr. Marks' way of saying thank you for the care and attention he'd received at Chase Farm earlier this year, when he spent 3 months there, 2 of them in intensive care, being treated for cancer. Money for the fans was raised at the Ajax annual garden fete in Broomfield Park, where Mr. Marks, his family and some Chase Farm nurses sold strawberries, which they picked from a local farm, and cream. With his health now restored, Mr. Marks is back busily involved with the many community organisations he belongs to. As well as Ajax, they include the Enfield Community Relations Council and the Enfield Consultative Advisory Group.
The leader of Britain's Roman Catholics attended a farewell ceremony for a well-loved Edmonton priest last week. The Archbishop of Westminster, Cardinal Basil Hume, celebrated Mass at St Edmund's Church in Croyland Road, Lower Edmonton, where Father Norman Kersey was retiring after 14 years. Also at the service were the area bishop, Bishop Philip Harvey, the Mayor of Enfield, Councillor Wyn Reardon, and nearly 500 local churchgoers and clergymen. Afterwards, church members held a reception for the priest in the church hall, where he was thanked individually by some of the many people he's worked with over the years. Reverend Father Kersey has spent more than 40 years in the church. After training as a priest, he was at Westminster Cathedral for 2 years, then worked in Watford and Ware before coming to Edmonton. He will be leaving the borough at the end of next month for a 4-month holiday in New Zealand, then will become an acting chaplain in Stoke Newington. He said he was very sad to leave Edmonton because it had been a wonderful parish, but he said he would not return to visit the church until the new priest, the Reverend Brian Ward, had had time to settle in.
A warm welcome was waiting for 2 new Methodist ministers at their first service in the borough. The Reverend Paul Hume and the Reverend Peter Featherstone found hundreds of churchgoers waiting to greet them at Trinity Church in Church Street, Enfield. The welcoming service was led by the Reverend Brian Galliers, chairman of the London North East District of the Methodist Church, and attended by many local ministers. Also there were the Mayor of Enfield, Councillor Wyn Reardon, and her consort, husband Harry. After the service, there was an informal social gathering. Mr. Hume had come to the borough from Taunton and his wife Hilary, with his wife Hilary and 3 young boys. He is now the minister in charge of Trinity Church and superintendent of the Enfield Methodist Circuit. Mr. Featherstone, previously from Walthamstow, will have oversight of the Methodist churches in Edmonton, Bushel Park and Pond's End. His wife Susan, who is also a Methodist minister, is working in the Whitechapel Mission in East London. They have 2 daughters.
Michael Portillo, MP for Enfield Southgate, nearly got a lot more than a nice suntan during his recent holidays in the south of France. He was relaxing in a place called Auribeau, not far from Cannes, when the terrible forest fire struck. The worst in many years, these fires caused widespread destruction over a huge area, killing 4 people and destroying some 500 homes. Mr. Portillo, his wife and friends quickly evacuated the house in which they were staying and made for Nice, where they learnt that everything around Auribeau, except their holiday house for some inexplicable reason, had been consumed by flames. However, the Tory MP did not seem to have suffered too much for his experiences, and even engaged in some light firefighting duties between his afternoon siestas and evening cocktails. He is now back in the relative safety of good old Blighty.
The Royal Ordnance Small Arms Division is to share in a £130 million order for the production of an anti-tank weapon. The contract is expected to bring 20 new jobs to Enfield. The Law 80 is a lightweight shoulder-launched weapon and will replace Swedish and American systems now being used by the British Army. Speaking from the small arms factory in Ordnance Road, Enfield Lock, Director David Morris said, "This is an important order for the factory and will strengthen Enfield's order book. It will lead to a need for further recruitment of about 20 workers."
The new manager of Barclays Bank branch in Enfield Town is 43-year-old John O'Connell. He succeeds Leslie Pym, who has retired after 44 years' service with Barclays. Born and educated in Coventry, Mr. O'Donnell joined Barclays there in 1959 and was assistant manager at various branches between 1974 and 1978. He became manager at Finchley Central branch in 1983. Mr. O'Connell, who is married with one son, lives in Redbourne, Hertfordshire. He is chairman of the bank's Northern London District Social Club and chairman-elect of the London Northern Branch Managers Club. He is a member of the Finchley Rotary Club and St Albans Squash Club.
2 Edmonton doctors concerned at the conditions of their old surgery decided to build a new one, and last week they began taking calls at their new home. Dr. Alfred Hollings and Dr. Omi Sharma have made the short journey in Bouncers Road from their old surgery to the new premises at 27 and 29. The move was carried out at their own expense, and they worked closely with the local family practitioner committee who advised on planning. They believe their new surgery will provide a more comfortable setting for patients and allow them to improve their general medical services.
A campaign to have a zebra crossing moved to a safer position was launched this week with the handing over of a 1,000-strong petition. Local residents and visitors to the Moorfield Health Centre are anxious to see a crossing placed so that people wanting to cross between the health centre and the nearby Co-op chemist shop can do so safely. A lot of elderly people visit the health centre, stressed Enfield and St Albans Cooperative Society spokesman Peter Court. At the moment they have to cross over 3 roads to get to the chemists. Now the petition is in the hands of Labour councillors who officially received it last Thursday. Enfield Wash councillor Joe Naughty, who was at the presentation, commented that the situation could have been avoided if the council had set up traffic lights at the junction of Carterhatch Lane and the Hertford Road instead of a mini roundabout. Labour Public Services spokeswoman Councillor Michelle Bull accepted the petition, which will be discussed by officers and committee members in the coming weeks.
Gregory Rataj and Tony Hodges are 2 of the 12 Hertfordshire firemen who last week made a sponsored walk in breathing apparatus to raise money in aid of a Hatfield fireman's 8-year-old daughter who suffers from cerebral palsy. The Jolly Farmers pub on Slades Hill, Enfield, was the last port of call on the Friday leg of the journey from Welling Garden City to Covent Garden. In all, they called at 8 McMullen hostelries. During the walk, the brewery presented the men with a cheque for £250 to add to the appeal, which they hoped would raise £20,000 for treatment for young Tracy Luff, who has suffered from the crippling disease since birth. Tracy can neither walk nor stand.
Now we've come to the end of side 1. If you'd like to turn your tape over, we'll meet you on the other side.